It's American Sniper time. Hello and welcome to the 160th episode of the Sales Podcast. I'm Wes Schaefer, the Sales Whisperer, your host. Today we have author Scott McEwen. You know him from his book and the Clint Eastwood movie American Sniper about U.S. Navy SEAL sniper Chris Kyle, the most prolific, shall we say, sniper in American history, who was unfortunately killed by an individual, who knows what, PTSD, maybe he was crazy, but quite unfortunate. But his story and his inspiration lives on through Scott. This is episode number 2 of SEAL Week. Yesterday we had on Joel Lambert, former Navy SEAL, now in Hollywood. You can see him on Lone Target. So go back and listen to session 159 if you missed that. Tomorrow we have coming up another Navy SEAL, U.S. Naval Academy graduate Dan O'Shea, who spent quite a bit of time in the desert, is a terrorist and hostage expert now. You can see him on most of the news channels quite often, everything from MSNBC to Fox News, talking about what's going on overseas, how we're handling it, how we should handle it. But his story on making that transition into being an entrepreneur is something you will want to listen to. I'm doing this all this week to raise money for the Tampa Bay Frogman Swim. I did that swim back in January, I think it's January 12th of 2015, 3.1 miles, 5 kilometers. I'm doing it again January 17th, 2016. And you can donate at helpwesswim.org. So as I said, it's part of the Tampa Bay Frogman Swim. All of the money goes to the Navy SEAL Foundation, which helps the families of Navy SEALs who have been injured or killed in the line of duty. And my connection to this is a classmate actually from the Air Force Academy that cross-commissioned into the Navy and is still an active duty Navy SEAL. He's an 06, a captain in the Navy. He'd be a full bird colonel if he'd stuck around in the Air Force. But, you know, if he'd have done that, we wouldn't have SEAL Week. Again, please go donate at helpwesswim.org. Leave a comment on the post, and please share this so others can be inspired by this, and also to help these great veterans, especially during this week of Veterans Week. So tomorrow is November 11th. It's Veterans Day. So please hug a veteran, thank them, and now on with the show. Scott McEwen, fellow SoCal resident. Earlier this year, you had the number 1 movie on earth, the number 1 book on earth, and were rated by Amazon as the number 1 author on earth. So how the heck did I convince you to come on the Sales Podcast?
Well, you know, that may sound lofty when you hear it, but it's a figment in time and everything, you know, as they say in life, timing is everything, and things just kind of lined up, some for the right reason, some for reasons I wish I could take back and never have happen, such as the loss of Chris Kyle. And everything just kind of rolled in together to have an amazing, rollout of the movie, an amazing, response from the people to the book. And as a result of that, it just kind of all, the planets aligned. That's all I can say.
Right. So for those that may not know, I mean, the book we're talking about is American Sniper. So you wrote that about Chris Kyle, the most lethal sniper in American history, right?
That's correct. Wrote it with Chris Kyle. And essentially what it is it's a series of recordings from Chris that basically describe his 4 deployments to Iraq, his experience in the SEAL teams, and his experience as, the most lethal sniper in the history of the United States military all time.
And, the reason I'm having you on is multiple reasons. One is, you're helping me with our SEAL Week that I'm rolling out now to help raise funds for my swim and the Tampa Bay Frogman Swim, and all the benefits go to the Navy SEAL Foundation. And that's it's become close to my heart because a classmate of mine is still an active duty SEAL, and he did some SEAL mind trick. It was like a Jedi SEAL mind trick, and he got me to swim in this thing, and now I'm doing it again. So I guess it's my own dang fault.
There you go.
But, I also wanted to talk to you about being in business and being an entrepreneur and writing books. I mean, I talk a lot with people about writing, the importance of writing. Can you share with us any words of wisdom on that front? What does it take to become a published author? I mean, I see yours. Are they pretty much Have they been novels? I see your other ones, Sniper and the Wolf, Target America. I mean, those are novels. Chris's, American Sniper is obviously a bit of a biography. But have you done others, or is the process similar for fiction versus nonfiction on what it takes to get your body of work out there and build a business around being an author?
Well, I mean, I would say that I have one other nonfiction that I did with a guy by the name of Richard Miniter, who's a writer out of Washington, D.C., real good guy and real patriot as well. And that was called Eyes on Target, and that's a book about a collection of stories on Navy SEALs, various Navy SEALs that we felt were amazing, in and of themselves, and kind of like blurbs of each of these individuals in that book, as well as a description of Eyes on Target really went into detail on what we perceived happened in Benghazi, as well as the loss of Ty Woods and Glenn Doherty, two former Navy SEALs, or you should say retired Navy SEALs that were working for the government in Benghazi when things went down there. But I think that to be straightforward with your question, the first deal is the toughest deal, as everything else in life. Kicking that door open to get into that publisher to do a story is always the most difficult, I think, transition for any writer. I mean, the content and the prose and the quality and everything else is obviously hugely important, but just the entree to that group that publishes is the most difficult part. And I think a lot of people now are making that entree through other means. In other words, internet publishing, things of that nature, which is all legitimate at this stage, sometimes is more legitimate than major publishing houses. And the reason I say that is your percentages for your money that you actually put in your pocket are huge in difference in going, with your own deal through Amazon than going with an established publisher. So many times we see people making the transition now where they get an audience, they build an audience, they start selling their stuff over, Amazon and through ebooks, and then transition. Some of them make the decision to transition to a more established publisher, but sometimes they don't, and they're making a lot more money than I am doing it. That's for sure.
Right. So you're an attorney by trade, right?
Right.
How did you end up becoming a fiction author and a nonfiction author?
Well, I mean, the deal with HarperCollins came as a result of the recordings and the work that I'd done with Chris. So they were very interested because of the nature of the work and obviously the accolades that Chris had, but also, the story itself was just amazing. So once American Sniper was established, and once American Sniper had gone and become what it became ultimately, then transitioning into the fiction world is, while a difficult transition, and I know a lot of guys that have done nonfiction have tried to make that jump, and it's not an easy jump, but it's one that can be done, I think, as long as you keep as close to real as you can to what got you to the dance, if you will. For me, the character that I created in the Sniper Elite series, first book being Sniper Elite One-Way Trip, is a SEAL Team 6 sniper. And, I've been very candid about the fact that I know a lot of guys in the teams. I've heard a lot of stories that I could never verbatim, let's just say, discuss outside of fictionalizing names, dates, locations, places, you name it. But that reality of those stories to be fictionalized, I think, creates great fodder for a fiction novel, because it's so close to the reality of what actually goes on out there in the world of Black Ops. Right.
So you started with American Sniper. How did you even get into that? I mean, again, you're looking at your biography. You're from, was it Oregon? Where was it? Montana?
Yeah, Eastern Oregon.
Eastern Oregon. You're here in SoCal, like Surf's Up, dude. You're an attorney, and then you're doing this biography on a SEAL. How'd that come to be?
Well, I live in a place east of San Diego called Alpine, and there's a lot of guys in the teams and a lot of families from the teams that live out here in this area. I am frankly drinking buddies with quite a few of them, and as a result of that relationship,
you like coffee and tea, right?
Yeah. We go out for tea and crumpets every now and then.
Good.
Anyway, so as a result of that relationship and getting to know those guys, I did a lot of help for them. They're gone, they're deployed. Scott, my wife's got a dispute with the mechanic who's charging her $1,500 for an oil change. Can you help me? My son's in a little bit of a wrinkle, with the law. Can you help me? My brother, yada, yada, yada. So I gave a lot of time up, which I happily did and still do for families that have, that need help. And on a legal basis, I donate that time and help people out as much as I can with you name it. And so as a result of that, I got to know Chris pretty well through other buddies in the SEAL teams. And then Chris and I became buddies, I think mainly because, I felt that our backgrounds were so similar. He grew up in the middle of nowhere in Texas. I grew up in the middle of nowhere in Oregon. He loved to hunt and fish. I loved to hunt and fish. He loved to, ride horses. I grew up on a ranch and had to ride horses, so we both had a lot of things in common, notwithstanding the fact that he was, in the SEAL teams and I had decided to become a lawyer. But we both had an affinity for the 300 Winchester Magnum, which was his gun of choice while he was working in Afghanistan, or I should say Iraq. And, I shot the 300 Win Mag since the time I grew up elk hunting in Oregon, because I always thought it was one of the most amazing reach out and touch you weapons at long range. And so we had an affinity there, and that just one thing grew into another. And then I started hearing his stories about what had gone on during his various deployments. And I felt like, it was very important that historically his story was recorded. And so that led to American Sniper.
That's amazing. So, and it's a great story in that, your story is that you were just giving, right? You're just being a human being, helping people out, and then opportunity presented itself, and you seized it. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I think I was just, my introduction to these guys was that, I don't like to, frankly, drink around lawyers. I don't like to hear those stories. I don't like listening to that stuff. I've done it for a number of years, and I found that the stories of heroism and the stories of true grit that I heard from the Navy SEALs were much more interesting for me to sit around and have a beer and listen to. So, that was my affinity to these guys. It really had nothing to do with a desire to record it or to make money off it or anything else. And then I heard Chris's story, and I saw him struggling with his marriage and struggling to get out of the SEAL teams and not sure what he was going to do for business. And I told him, I said, look, dude, I can't tell you that this is going to be successful or not, but I can tell you this: if it's done right and we do it right, I believe you have one of the most compelling stories I've ever heard in my life.
Right.
And I said, I felt like it was worthy of attempting to get it told to the rest of America, because his story resonates, I think, and we found now resonates with a lot of people about not only the commitment that our men and women have done for this country, but also just the true nature of a kid that, really would not quit and really was willing to put his life on the line for this country and for his teammates, time and time and time again.
But you had never written a book before, right?
I had not. I've done a lot of writing, but and a lot of technical writing, but I had never written a book, in a fashion to what this was going to be. So
how did you know you could do it?
Well, it's like everything else in life. You don't know that you can do it, but I hired an expert at the end to help me finish it once HarperCollins wanted to change it from third person to first person. So I did hire another guy, but I felt like that what was done at that stage and what was the vision at that stage was already done, but I just wanted to make sure that it was absolutely as close to perfect as you could get, because I felt like it was that important a project that I should invest whatever was there for an advance just to hire another guy who'd done this a couple times to make sure that it was going to work. So really, my investment in hiring this guy and paying him out of my money was to basically just make sure that every I was perfect, every T was crossed. And, as I grew up being a litigator in Southern California, I knew that I might not know how to explain to a jury, how a dual diagonal brake system works in a GM car when I'm defending GM, but I know how to find good people to explain it better than what I do.
Right. That's the old Henry Ford story I always talk about, right? Or like, you're not that smart. He's like, I got all these buttons on my desk, and if you need transmissions, I hit this button.
Yeah.
The smartest transmission guy on the planet will be here in 2 minutes, you know?
Exactly.
Just surround yourself with good people, huh?
That's exactly it. And that was the way I treated the first project. And through that collaboration, I feel like I got exactly what I wanted as far as the story was concerned, and what Chris wanted, more importantly, what Chris wanted from his story. And that was really what I wanted, was for him to feel that he had his day to tell his story.
Yeah, and these guys, like my buddy that's still in, I've known him since we were freshmen in college, 1988. And he doesn't talk a lot. Was it hard pulling this out of Chris?
I think one of the most difficult things about the whole thing was getting him to talk about it. And I think that that was the true trial lawyer in me, was the ability to say, okay, but if this happened and you got this silver star with valor and you pulled this kid out of this situation, then how did it all lead up to the point where you were in machine gun fire, had somebody by the back of his body armor, shot through the legs, and you were being, shot from all sides to the point where the dirt had built up so bad that the dust was covering your trail from the bad guys shooting at you. Like I'm talking about reading Silver Star commendations to him and saying, no, you got to get into detail here, because this tells kind of a story, but I want to hear what exactly happened, and that was the true difficulty, I think, in getting that story done.
Right. Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, the more I learn about SEALs, it's just good grief. All these special ops, special forces guys, it's just, people have no idea.
No, you know what it is too, and at the end of the day, they'll all admit it. If you make them admit it, is they're all adrenaline junkies in one way or another. I mean, they really are. They all run off of high octane fuel, or I should say the highest octane fuel, and that is, they like that shot of adrenaline, and sometimes they get to the point where they're addicted to it. And if you get too close to the sun, we lose a lot of them, because these guys are willing to put it on the line and take it that extra step, that sometimes puts them in immense danger. Yeah,
it's and honestly, it's like our military and our government. I mean, they have to do some things that aren't pretty, because there's bad people out there that don't like us.
Exactly. And then I really find it distasteful and really pathetic, frankly. And I've been very open in my comments about the politicalization or the PCing of our military, and particularly our special forces. Not only the SEALs, but the Marines, the Delta, the other guys. Now, you were in the Air Force, and like you and I both know, with the exception of probably flying, a jet fighter with taking 8 or 9 Gs, and having a body that can take that, I would say a woman, and maybe a woman can take that even too, but I would say a woman can probably run the controls on your average plane just as well or better than a man. And and I'm the first one to say that. But when you got guys that are out there in the middle of a battlefield for days on end, living in their own feces and urine, and then have to get up and carry a 200-pound man 2 miles after he gets shot off the battlefield, you need a pretty tough hombre to be able to do that. And I frankly feel there's a distinction, between men and women when we get to that stage.
Right. Yeah, it's a beast.
Yeah.
Good grief. Well, what's next on your plate? I mean, are you still doing law?
No, I'm not. I'm pretty much done wrapping things up. I take the occasional pro bono case. I'm still a member of the bar,
right?
And I still help out military people when I can,
right? And
take on causes there, But I'm pretty much done with it. I'm in the 4th book in the Sniper Elite series. I'm just finishing that off now, and the Sniper Elite series is now being cast for a major motion picture with Sony. And so
nice.
I'm happy with that, because the team that has been put together there, I would say, is possibly nearly as strong as the team that we put together with American Sniper, although I will give deference to Clint Eastwood. I don't think we've got quite the director, and I don't mean that badly towards the director we have, but I think the director we have would have to tip his hat to Clint as well.
Right.
You know?
Well, and let them know you got the biggest badass Air Force weatherman in the history of Air Force weatherman. I mean, I'm available if they need me. I mean,
okay.
that'll put the movie over the top.
There you go. You know, I mean, I remember when we first interviewed Bradley Cooper for the role of Chris Kyle, and you know, and Chris and I were both kind of, you know, giving him a hard time, and you know, and Chris is like, hey, you know, I'll never forget it because they only had one conversation, and I set it up by cell phone. Unfortunately, we lost Chris shortly thereafter, and you know, I said, you know, Bradley, you know, kind of jokingly, I said, Chris is kind of wondering whether, you know, People Magazine's best looking man on earth for 3 years running is able to like get down, put a little mud on his face, and get in the dirt and crawl with the SEALs for a while, you know, in the middle of God knows nowhere. And Bradley's like, you know what? He said, you boys are going to see that there's a little bit more to this actor than just a pretty face. And I said, well, then by God, that's exactly what we're looking for. Is somebody that can get down and play the part. And you know what? He did it. I mean, I was frankly astounded with the job that Bradley Cooper did playing Chris Kyle. It was that close to the man.
Yeah, it was an awesome movie. I mean, it was unbelievable. So how'd you make that shift though from? So you wrote a great biography, but now you jump into fiction. I mean, isn't that a big shift, or was it not as big a shift, or did you just kind of have an affinity for it and you ran with it? I mean, how'd that come about?
You know, it came about in two ways. You know, I always thought that, like I said, I'd heard so many stories about operations that were, you know, classified, frankly. And so and there's always stories that are out there, but, and I will never reveal who told me the stories, of course, but, you know, you hear these stories from just amazing heroism of guys on Black Ops stuff, which is probably, you know, 60% of what these guys do.
Hey, Scott, your mic is getting a little muffled.
Oh, I'm sorry. You know, it's probably 60% of what these guys do at times is totally classified.
Right.
So one of the stories that I heard, and frankly, I don't know if it's declassified now or not, but it's pretty common knowledge, so I could give a damn if the DOD comes after me at this stage. But was the story of Jessica Lynch,
right,
and how Jessica Lynch was actually recovered. And, you know, you saw some press release showing, I don't know if it was Army or who it was, going in there and supposedly recovering this person at this hospital site after she was taken prisoner, you know, early on after their motorcade was hit, and she was taken prisoner and all the others were killed. But you really didn't see what actually happened, and that was the SEAL teams found her, and the SEAL teams really took that op over and got her recovered, and then turned it over to the Army. And here comes all the cameras and the press event showing that they'd saved the female from death and dismemberment. And then we found out later that she had been raped, and that she'd had been, you know, what you would expect, being captured by frankly savages. Anyway, so you know, I always felt that story was interesting, and so the first book was about a SEAL team guy that's called to get back after a captured female after a 160th SOAR, which I'm sure you know is the Air Force, you know, equivalent of special ops carriers. They do all the work for the spec ops guys.
Right.
The SOAR pilots do, and about a pilot being taken from the 160th SOAR that is personal friends with the lead character. So you have this pilot, good-looking, blonde American pilot, being taken by Al-Qaeda and taken and transported into the Hindu Kush, into the mountains of Afghanistan. And what do? They rape her on television. They, you know, show all these heinous acts being done to her. She's been shot in the leg as a result of the capture. She's dying from a festering bullet wound. And they make a $25 million demand on the United States government to get her back. Mm-hmm. Well, you know that this worst case scenario has happened, but you know it you know the demands and the money demands are a regular part of that world, of the world in the Middle East.
Right.
Anyway, what do? So she happens to be personal friends of a SEAL Team 6 guy that is assigned to go out there and figure out what the hell's going on, and his unit is out there, and the government knows where she's being captured, giving you the background, and basically says we're going to go in there in a big push with the army and the tanks and the copters and everything else and get this girl out. Well, everybody knows she'll be dead by the time a full-scale operation like that gets mounted and put into place. That type of an op is never going to save the girl. So he makes a decision, to basically do an unauthorized mission into the area to try and pull her out before the good guys get there in force. And that's why it's called One Way Trip. And it's really it's based on some stuff that I'd heard, not only with Jessica Lynch, but other operations where guys have been taken prisoner. And let's just say, if it's done right by the CIA, they let them take matters into their own hands and get these things done.
Right. Do you think you can ever cross the line maybe by telling too many stories? Like maybe some of these SEALs, they need to be in the shadows?
Well, and I understand that, and there's a whole body of the SEALs, a lot of times the older guard, if you will, that say, hell, the word SEAL shouldn't even exist in the public's mind, like we shouldn't even disclose the fact that there is a thing called a SEAL. And, and I appreciate that attitude, and I appreciate them guarding their secrets that way and wanting to keep their society that way. But I also appreciate the fact that there are men and women out there that are heroes and that can be SEALs. And I never, ever tell stories that would ever compromise active or anybody that's even close to active in the military. And I know the difference. And anything that I do that's nonfiction is fully submitted and vetted by the DOD.
Yeah. Cool.
Or I should say fiction. My nonfiction will always be vetted. American Sniper, thank God, we got it vetted, because I don't know if you know all the problems that happened with No Easy Day or, the other stuff with Matt Bissonette and that all those guys that did not submit, but it created a real nightmare for them because of them having to deal with, all of the government blowback.
Right. Yeah. Some things do have to be kept secret, but yeah, I agree. I'm inspired by these guys, seeing what they do, putting it on the line. Freedom isn't free, right? And people, they really take it for granted. I see so many people that are just clueless, just bebopping through life, man. No idea that bad guys are very close, and they are planning. They live their lives to plan to attack us.
Every day. And I think, I think President Bush, as much as, he may have made his own errors, I liked GW, and the reason I liked him was he made the efforts to try and get these things done. And and I think somebody in his administration said it best: we have to get it right every single time. They just have to get right every now and then, and it still looks like a huge loss to the United States when that happens. So, the commitment of our men and women, of our forces, to getting it right every time and putting their life on the line is huge.
Right.
And I really believe that.
Well, man, Scott, this has been fantastic. I appreciate you taking the time and finding your iPad.
I'm sorry about that technical difficulty there. And if there's anything else I can do, to help you in your efforts to to support the foundation, I'm a big supporter of the foundation as well, and several other SEAL charities. And I think it's a good thing that you're doing, because the bottom line is if everybody did something, these people would feel like they're a little bit more appreciated, among other reasons.
Right. And so I want to give two websites. Your main site is scottmcEwen.com, right?
Correct.
And so they can find your books, your events, and speaking, and we'll be linking to that as well in the show notes. And I bought a URL it'll redirect to the donation page, but it's just it's helpwestswim.org. And you can donate any amount. My goal this year is $10,000. They only want us to raise $1,500. So that's why I'm doing this SEAL Week, pushing this out, interviewing folks like Scott and actual SEALs as well to just highlight what they're doing, SEALs that are in business. They laid it on the line, put it on the line, and then they're in business. And there's a ton of things the entrepreneur can learn, right, from the dedication and the commitment to excellence that our military instill. So,
yeah, I think another guy you might want to talk to too, that I'm proud to say that I've helped on his way to being a pretty much getting to be a household name, and that's Ryan Zinke, congressman elect right now out of Montana, and a good friend of mine. And I supported Ryan in his run for Congress, and I'm supporting him, and I know he hasn't made the decision yet. Hopefully, in being Speaker of the House, even as a freshman, I know how crazy that sounds, or unprecedented that sounds, but boy, we need guys, men and women of the military, to step up and do political service, because they've been there and they've done that, and they know what it is to make these decisions and what the consequences are, both good and bad. And so I'd like to see as many men and women of the military as possible running for office, hopefully national office, to try and get this country back on its feet.
Well, I've learned a couple things about myself in these 45 years thus far, and one is I'm not very good at politics. I'd much rather tell somebody to stick it where the sun doesn't shine, but I am good about talking and marketing and sales. So if I can help these guys build a bigger platform, I'm right there with you, man.
Well, I appreciate that as well, and I want to talk to you about that off the record or offline as well, because it sounds to me like you're moving in the right direction.
All right. Well, we will call this a wrap, Mr. Scott McEwen, scottmcewen.com. Thanks for being on the Sales Podcast in the inaugural SEAL Week. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you very much.
It's so awesome speaking with people that are independent. I mean, Scott has all the money he needs. He has success. So he does not have to sugarcoat things. So like it or lump it, huh? That's all the more reason to work hard and become successful, right? So you can have the money and the freedom and the flexibility to live your life as you want, say what you want, as Scott does. That's why I loved having him on. As I mentioned at the beginning and all week, as you go through these this episode and the next 3, but all 5 of them from the week, please head on over to helpwestswim.org and donate to my swim. Help this Air Force guy get through 5 kilometers of water, will you? And it's all to help the Tampa Bay Frogman Swim, which helps the Navy SEAL Foundation, which helps our Navy SEALs, okay? And as I mention all the time, please share this, leave a comment, help others find this podcast so they can grow in their own business and to help our Navy SEALs. Thanks for listening, and as always, remember to sell different.